A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction. It is an atomic bomb. But the greatest marvel is not the size of the enterprise, its secrecy, or its cost, but the achievement of scientific brains in making it work.
It was the year 1933. The Jews of Europe were under direct threat by Nazi Germany. At the time, Germany was led by none other than Adolf Hitler. It happened to be that some of the most brilliant scientists at the time were Jewish. Some of these scientists included Edward Teller, Leo Szilard, and Albert Einstein, and even more. Eventually, all the scientists had evaded Europe to escape Hitler's reign of terror. In 1938, we had received alarming news that Hitler and Werner Heisenberg, who was a German physicist, have achieved the unimaginable. They had split the atom. They managed to do this by discovering nuclear fission with uranium, which is the process of the nucleus of an atom splitting into smaller parts, causing a nuclear chain reaction. With this knowledge, Germany knew they could create a weapon of mass destruction. This frightened Leo Szilard, who was a physicist who fled to America. Szilard wanted to warn President Roosevelt about how much destruction this could cause, but he lacked the stature to. August 2, 1939, Szilard decided to write a letter and have his ally Albert Einstein sign it, because he was a noteworthy scientist. Only 2 months later, on October 11th, in response to Szilard and Einstein's letter, President Roosevelt forms the Advisory Committee on Uranium. However, this committee was a low priority because the conflict of World War II recently unraveled. Nevertheless, they continued with research, knowing that Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Berlin was actively studying uranium. Later, on December 7, 1941, a catastrophic conflict took place.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked.
The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, killing over 2,000 soldiers. This caused us to declare war on Japan, and Roosevelt wanted production to begin on the atomic bomb. So he authorizes the Manhattan Project. He ordered General Groves to take charge of the project.
He was sure it was a boondoggle. He was sure you could never do such a thing.
At the University of Chicago, Leo Szilard and Enrico Fermi were taking the first steps to prove Groves wrong. They had to produce enriched uranium to establish a fuel that was suitable for building a bomb. This process would be extremely difficult and very costly. General Groves chose Los Alamos, New Mexico to be the site where the bomb would be manufactured. Groves chose a physics professor named J. Robert Oppenheimer to head up the installation. He was a very unlikely candidate to the task because he was known to be disastrous. During late 1942, these theoretical physicists were trying to determine how much enriched U-235 it would take to make a bomb. Oppenheimer and his team doubled the amount of uranium-235 that they believed would be the right amount to reach critical mass to create a nuclear explosion. Determined to have the bomb ready for war, Groves notified workers in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, a town built to construct the bomb, that they had 6 months to build an electromagnetic calutron that will be used to separate U-235 from U-238. They built multiple calutrons and they codenamed these sites Y-12. Meanwhile, in Los Alamos, a test bomb called Gadget was being developed. Also, the newly found element in 1941, plutonium, was also gaining favor to be used as a fuel for a bomb. This is because plutonium was more likely to undergo fission than uranium, and it was much more accessible than enriched uranium. In Hanford, Washington, 3 reactors were assembled to produce plutonium on August 24, 1943. Over 60,000 construction workers took part in the assembly of the reactors. By September, Groves had initiated construction on a 3rd site to produce fuel to make the bomb, called K-25. This site was a large gaseous diffusion plant located at Oak Ridge. Unfortunately, it was becoming more unlikely that enough uranium-235 and plutonium would be made to impact the war. With these struggles, Oppenheimer brings in a new group of scientists and reorganizes Los Alamos. These new people who are working on the project come up with a new idea that shrinks the distance between the chain reaction during the splitting of the nuclei. By late 1944, enough enriched uranium-235 fuel is composed to make 1 uranium gun bomb. If the military strategists were correct, it would take more than one bomb to get the enemy to surrender. So it was vital that the upcoming plutonium implosion bomb test is successful. In February of 1945, the weapon design for the uranium gun bomb was complete. They named this bomb Little Boy. Next month in March, the plutonium bomb, Fat Man, was approved. The test for the plutonium implosion bomb named Gadget was finally scheduled for July. Colonel Paul Tibbets was selected to pilot the Enola Gay for his extensive training with flying B-29 planes. Tibbets was preparing for the deployment of the weapons at Wendover Field in Utah. Sadly, on April 12, 1945, President Roosevelt passed away in Warm Springs, Georgia. This brings Vice President Harry S. Truman to be the new president. Secrecy on the project was so confidential that Truman was not aware of the bomb development and was briefed within his first week of office. Less than a month later of Roosevelt's death, Nazi Germany's ruler, Adolf Hitler, committed suicide knowing that defeat was imminent. This left Karl Dönitz to carry out the Nazi surrender.
I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations.
Although Germany surrendered, Japan continued to fight. In June 1945, Tibbets and his unit fly to Tinian Island, 1,400 miles away from Tokyo.
I wanted to have my crews fly over enemy territory because they were not used to flying over enemy territory. I wanted to get practice flying, being shot at, flying alone.
On July 16, 1945, in the New Mexico desert 200 miles from Los Alamos, the test, codenamed Trinity, for the atomic bomb Gadget is ready to take place. Scientists waited anxiously at their posts, and General Groves lied prone facing away from the bomb and thought to himself, "What am I going to do when the timer hits 0 and nothing happens?" At 5:30 a.m., July 16, 1945, the world entered the atomic age with a ball of fire extended up to 40,000 feet in the air. Groves reported the successful test to Secretary of War Henry Stimson. A poll was taken that most scientists believed that some sort of demonstration of the bomb should be necessary before bombing civilians. Despite the fact, General Groves bottled up the petition until after the bombing. The government and military had high intention to use the bomb promptly on the Japanese cities to scare them into surrendering. They wanted to do this quickly before the Russians got in on the post-war settlement. In November of 1945, assault was scheduled for 1.5 million troops to go in on the mainland of Japan. By this time in the war, the United States was furious with Japan. We had demolished their air force and their navy, and they still hadn't surrendered. In the spring of 1945, General Groves chose 2 Japanese cities to demonstrate how powerful the bombs really were, and to end this war once and for all. Groves chose Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The final decision laid in President Truman's hands. After having a convincing conversation with his secretary, James Burns, he decides to change the world forever by dropping the 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Let there be no mistake. We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war. If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth.
We had made countless efforts to compromise with the Japanese, but they would not stop fighting. Since the Japanese failed to compromise with us, at 2:45 a.m. on August 6, 1945, Paul Tibbets had lifted off the runway at Tinian Island. Then by 8:15 a.m., the uranium bomb, Little Boy, was dropped by the Enola Gay onto Hiroshima. Little Boy had killed over 130,000 people. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, a second and more powerful plutonium bomb named Fat Man was dropped onto Nagasaki. This bomb killed at least 80,000 people just on the first day of the effects of the bombs. During these days, over 200,000 people had died in Japan. Finally, on September 2, 1945, Japan officially surrendered to the United States. Not only did this resolve the conflict between the United States and the opposing countries of World War II, but it changed history and sparked a nuclear arms race. In 1949, the Soviet Union had their hands on an atomic bomb, and they detonated it at their test site called Semipalatinsk. That same year, President Truman ordered the creation of a hydrogen bomb project. Since then, the arsenals of many countries contain nuclear weapons that can be catastrophic to the world. Overall, the Manhattan Project changed war forever and solved a conflict that changed the world.